Hello and welcome to the 2022 Global Impact Summit. We are in our East Asia series now. My name is Patrick Brothers, and today we are going to focus on New Energy Nexus China. We're joined by Andrew Chang, Program Director of New Energy Nexus China. Welcome, Andrew.
It's a pleasure to be here, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Our pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation, having had a sneak peek of some of the slides and the topics that we're going to cover. But we're going to kick off and let Andrew kind of take the lead and walk us through. I'm going to jump in and ask some questions, Andrew, on the way through as well. And we'll take it from there. So over to you.
Yeah, awesome, Patrick. Well, thanks for having me, and really excited to be speaking to everyone about New Energy Nexus China. We have a lot to share today. So maybe just a quick background on myself. So I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, California. My background is in solar mostly. So, in 2009, 2010 in the Bay Area, it was a big solar boom in California. And since then, I've really been in the world of startup acceleration. So working at Powerhouse, which is now an early ventures fund for solar software and climate solutions. And now been in Shanghai for about 5 years now, supporting industry decarbonization and climate solutions here. So excited to be here, and we're in an incredibly exciting space to be operating in, especially now where climate is top of mind for everyone. So why don't I take you guys through a little bit about the organization, New Energy Nexus as a whole, as a global organization. So this really is our key mission statement. We want to reach 100% clean energy for 100% of the people. And so what we mean by this is really ensuring that everyone from all over the world, from all walks of life, have access to clean energy. And we know what the benefits of clean energy provides to people around the world. So we'll sort of get to that in detail. Now, New Energy Nexus, we are truly a global organization. As you can see on this map here, we have about 12 chapters around the world at the moment, really focused on areas and markets that matter, right? And we're talking about China, Southeast Asia, and really leveraging these areas that have massive impact and footprint in terms of carbon emissions on a global level. And as you can see, we have chapters in California, New York. These are obviously two very progressive places as it relates to public and private partnerships around climate solutions. And we've been operating in China since 2017, and just recently gone to Sydney, as well as Nigeria just this year. So really excited to be operating all around the world with different types of climate solutions, different funders, different partners. And there's no one size fits all with this. Every market has different needs, different regulations, different business cultures, different practices, different climates. And so each of these areas require a different solution for everyone. So moving on, and Patrick, feel free to just jump in if you have any questions here.
I am going to jump in right now. This is like an incredible network, as we've talked about before. How often do you get the opportunity to compare notes with colleagues who are in different markets?
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually one of our core strengths, is that we have a very close-knit team around the world. We actually have weekly calls where we're, sharing best practices, but also, climate startups and solutions that we see are up and coming. And let's say we have a energy efficiency program in New York on the built environment. We have some startups here in China that have been doing similar work. We will recommend those startups to New York. And so sharing notes, sharing our network, sharing best practices is something that we do on the daily.
So cool.
Yeah. So moving on. So sort of get into detail of China here. And what's interesting about China is, as many of know, in September 22nd of 2020, President Xi Jinping made a pledge for carbon neutrality. And that really put the writing in stone. And when the central government in China makes declaration and makes a commitment, it's going to happen, and it's going to drive the industry forward in many ways. There's no better way to show where the country, where the industry is heading, than a commitment like that. So we're now seeing tons of investment, tons of corporate innovation that's happening. But really, once a central level government policy is made, the next step is how is it now then going to be implemented on the subnational level, right? And when you say subnational, you're talking about provinces, then you're talking about a city level, even county level, right? So there's different layers of government, and each of them in their respective places, whether East China, West China, Northern China, Southern China, all have different needs, especially as it relates to decarbonization goals. So sort of some bullet points I've mentioned here is that this subnational roadmap is what you see here to reach carbon neutrality. These are sort of the designated key economic zones of China, if you will. They all have diverse industry focus. So the industry focus, let's say for Baoshan, you'll see in the right here near Shanghai, they're really known for steelmaking. So Baowu Steel, one of the biggest steel makers in the world, is located in Baoshan. So their manufacturing decarbonization needs are very different from, let's say, Shenzhen, right? Shenzhen down in the Greater Bay Area is a haven for BYD, which is one of the biggest EV auto manufacturers in the world. If you go to Shenzhen and you just arrive at the airport, everything's electrified from the buses to the taxis. And you have Xiaopeng down there as well, which is another EV manufacturer. So each of these areas has unique needs. And of course, Beijing, Beijing being capital of China, those are where all the policies are made. So all the think tanks, the government think tanks and the international NGOs, they're all based in Beijing to really try to figure out what is the best path forward for China as it relates to policy. And so, and on the third point here, government support with capital and corporates lead with technology, right? So, many subnational governments, like governments all around the world, want to build their city, want to bring new companies, bring in new tax dollars, bring new talent and technology. I like to say 3 T's is it's taxes, right? So tax revenue, technology, and then talent, right? So I think this is relatable for all governments around the world. And so when you think about those 3 things under the context of carbon neutrality, you have different needs, different goals, and different solutions depending on the industry that is in that area. So if it's steel, if it's cement, if it's sustainable transport, is it smart cities? Is it agriculture, right? So each of these areas has its different climate, different needs in China. And then lastly, regional matchmaking between local needs and pragmatic solutions that can scale up innovation. So that is sort of where we come in as New Energy Nexus, as sort of the matchmaker, the accelerator. We have a rich pool of climate solutions and startups, and we have a great ecosystem that we can leverage to really accelerate those solutions and connect them to the right people.
It's huge. I love this. I always love hearing about how much activity is happening in China, which, for many folks, they just don't get to see that because of either the language barrier or whatever. Andrew, how much of the innovation that you're seeing is happening and focused on China, and how much of it has a bit of an outbound or kind of cross-border focus as well?
That's a great question, Patrick. So right now, I would say in the past 2 years, because of the strict lockdowns and the quarantine and travel restrictions, it's really been focused on the domestic market. And not to mention, supply chain disruptions domestically and of course globally, right? That just made it very hard to conduct business abroad. And so a lot of the market has really been focused on internal needs, domestic needs. I think that hopefully soon that, as travel restrictions loosen, I know Hong Kong, right? They recently have now, 3 days quarantine instead of 7 days, that we're sort of moving in this direction. And my biggest response to that is that we need both China in and China out approach, right? we cannot, as it relates to climate, we cannot be isolated in silos. We need to be adapting technologies, great technologies from abroad, and scaling them in China because of just the deployment potential. And then also, from the learnings and best practices that China has developed can help, the global South, right? And be able to transport its scale, its technology, and its ability to reduce costs by manufacturing, high volumes of scale to the rest of the world. And so I think it's a complementary sort of need from within China as well as outside of China. But I would say in the last 2 years, it's been really focused on domestic because of COVID.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It does strike me the work that we've been doing to understand China is I don't think people appreciate how significant and kind of advanced the clean tech is in China. And I think that, as you mentioned, COVID has kind of forced everyone to focus domestically, I think. And so fingers crossed, we are looking for a few years ahead of kind of rebuilding some of that connectivity, inbound, outbound, cross-border, etc. I know even practically, I used to travel every year to Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, and that hasn't happened in a long time now. And so you lose that connectivity, and you kind of, as a consequence, lose track of the developments that are happening in that market. So I think it is a super interesting time to kind of reconnect with China, especially as you mentioned, post that kind of decree. And as you said, I think everyone kind of knows when China decides to do something, it does it. And so super interesting times. Wow. Thanks for sharing.
No, absolutely. So just moving on, diving into sort of what we had mentioned in terms of the areas of opportunity. So we've got central level government making big policy decisions: carbon neutrality 2060, carbon peaking 2030, carbon neutrality 2060. Now it's up to the subnational government to figure out how to do that, right? How to roll it out, how to execute. So this is where New Energy Nexus has come in as a startup accelerator model, but really addressing local needs. And so we've had the fortunate pleasure of partnering with the Sichuan Energy Internet Research Institute of Tsinghua University. They're an energy institute under the Electrical Engineering Department of Tsinghua University, which is one of the leading engineering schools in China and the world. And we're working with the Tianfu area, Park City in Chengdu, and they're a very progressive subnational government that is building essentially a smart city, and they're very keen on partnerships that can bring in, as I mentioned, the 3 Ts and solutions to sort of Western China, right? When you talk about China, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, right? First tier cities, very developed. Right now there's also a huge boom that's happening in Chengdu, Sichuan, and Chongqing, and Xi'an that don't really make it to the headlines. But if you go there, they're still mega cities, right? Where which have lots of energy usage and lots of people that are building cool things. And so our focus is really trying to make it a sort of an equal playing field. So while we have our main office is in Shanghai, but we actually travel to Chengdu quite often, and we work in Tianfu area, which is in Sichuan province. We established this partnership with the Energy Institute as well as Tianfu area, called the Energy Internet Innovation Entrepreneurship Center. And this is sort of a umbrella organization or company that runs 2 programs. One is our EXCEL Accelerator, which is I'll sort of dive into detail in the next slide, and then EIES, which is our Energy Internet Innovation Entrepreneurship Summit. So these 2 tracks we feel as a strong bottom-up approach to address what the local needs of the subnational want, but also get more climate solutions out in the in the ecosystem. And so we're on our 3rd year of this partnership, and in working with both Tianfu area as well as Tsinghua has been incredible. And so, why don't I dive into?
Super impressive. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, EXCEL Accelerator. So this is actually our flagship program, as I mentioned. It's under EIIEC. I know that can be a mouthful, but we really focus on growth stage startups, both energy and climate, but with the emphasis on heavy industry and utilities. So we're talking Three Gorges, we're talking CNOOC, Town Gas, Baowu Steel. These are some of the major state-owned utilities that are are doing massive productions as it relates to heavy industry, and so providing solutions to them, climate solutions that can even reduce carbon emissions by 1%, that's massive. And so we're actually on our third cohort of running this program. We're hosting our road shows actually in the next couple of months for our third cohort. We supported about 48, just call it 50 startups to date. And our goal is really to create commercial pilot projects between some of these big corporates as well as these startups. And we also provide AWS services, Amazon AWS services, capacity building and networking and consultation. Nice. We do not invest in these companies. That requires another a license and it's a whole different ball game when it comes to investing. Yeah. So our focus really now is more of a roadshow showing that these solutions do exist, and because of the Tsinghua network, we do have strong relationships with a lot of these big industry players that allows us to then develop these commercial pilot projects.
Super cool, really cool. Before we move on, Andrew, are you finding there's any kind of three cohorts in any patterns that you're seeing about the kind of companies and the kind of categories that are coming through the accelerator and maybe are not? Just interested in three cohorts in any learnings.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Patrick. So I think because we're focused on industry, heavy industry, energy efficiency and IoT is sort of like the big thread through all cohorts. And we're talking, digital twin devices that can help, reduce, or help detect fault detection, right, on manufacturing lines, right? We're also looking at other energy storage applications as well, different compositions of battery materials and BMS systems. That's sort of track number 2 that we're seeing. And then obviously sustainable transportation as well. EVs has been a boom, but within those big investments from Sequoia Capital on big EV companies, we're seeing little applications when it comes to, is it the battery swapping technology that is happening, or something that's making BMS more efficient. And so these are sort of the big areas that we're seeing. So energy efficiency, storage, and then sustainable transport are sort of like the 3 sort of biggest categories that we see through these cohorts.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, this is an exciting program, and we're actually having our annual summit in the first week of December, and in Chengdu. And I don't have a slide on EIES, but we had the pleasure of this was pre-pandemic, 2019. We actually invited 20 startups from all around the world to China, and to Chengdu, and actually an Australian startup, Re-Electrify, was also part of that cohort as well. And these are the type of exchanges that we want, and it's hard to do that online, and everyone's sick of Zoom these days. And so we hope to sort of kick that back up, hopefully in 2023.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
And so EXCEL Accelerator is really focused on sort of our downstream work. So, tangible technology, focus on industry, heavy industry. Now, if we can go upstream, sort of an area that we just started to focus on actually right in the middle of the pandemic is this whole idea of climate fintech. And many people understand what climate is, and people know what fintech is, but putting these two worlds together, where we define as climate finance technology as digital financial technology that catalyzes decarbonization. And this is like in a new and emerging sector that we see has massive potential. Just how fintech has disrupted the financial industry, climate fintech equally will have sort of same and similar impact. So we see it, climate fintech is the intersection of climate finance, digital technology, These digital innovations, applications, and platforms serve as crucial financial intermediaries and mediums between stakeholders pursuing decarbonization. So we started with a report in 2020, really focused on what we define as climate fintech in US, in Europe, in China, and we did a Chinese version of that. And in 2021, we then sort of dispersed this report and try to create, an awareness that there are neobanks out there, such as Aspiration Bank. There's climate fintech companies like Ant Forest, that's part of the Ant Group, as you know, that's planted hundreds of millions of trees, activating sort of consumer behavior.
Yeah.
There's applications out there that does climate risk analysis for insurance companies that can better forecast weather perils for certain companies. And so this is an area that's really emerging, and we sort of see this as upstream, right? If there's ways we can allow climate solutions to mobilize more capital, that naturally will flow more towards technologies downstream, which is the heavy industry, sustainable transport, smart cities, IoT, energy efficiency.
Awesome. So cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we're actually working with CIB Fintech, Xingye Yinhang, China Industrial Bank, which is one of the biggest green banks here in China. They have their own sort of fintech arm, and right now we are sort of running an accelerated program with them. Not only sort of telling them what climate fintech is and the impact that it could have, but also introducing climate fintech startups to them as a way to address some of their decarbonization goals. So a company that you may have heard of called Neotech, that is they just registered in Singapore, but they're based in Shanghai, and they do essentially ESG reporting for a lot of corporates, and they've received some significant investment from local investors as well as Singapore as well, the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Singapore. So that's like an emerging climate fintech company out there that's really exciting to watch.
Andrew, you talked about CIB Fintech as like a green bank. Is that like that sounds like a category, or is that something that's been mobilized recently in terms of classifying banks, or how does that work?
I mean, so China Industrial Bank is actually a big bank. CIB Fintech is a department under CIB, but it's almost as big as Bank of China, ICBC. It's one of the big ones, right? It's just that they're known for deploying the most green loans.
Got it.
50, don't quote me on this, but a vast majority of their portfolio is really distributed for green loans, and so they're one of the biggest funders in green renewable
and green loans. I'm guessing as well is like project finance for
Correct.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense.
Correct.
Super interesting.
So it's natural that we work with them and also try to create a model where a lot of other banks are also trying to figure out how do we help decarbonize our supply chain? How do we ensure that the people that we're giving loans to are abiding by ESG principles, right? And as you know, that's such a buzzword these days, and how does that actually go into practice, right? And instead of just talking the talk, right? So and CIB out there is doing real amazing things.
That's cool.
Just checking on time. So this is my last slide, and I just want to share. This is a trip that my teammate and I took earlier this year to Ningxia, which is Western China. And what you see here is what we feel is the snapshot of China's clean energy future. You see a coal-fired power plant over on the left. You see sort of wind turbines on the right, and a 20 megawatt solar farm behind us. And the sun is setting on, or rising on, depending on how you look at it, is on the renewable energy side. And we see that this is a perfect example of what's happening in the industry. And while coal still exists and still makes up a vast majority of of the energy production in China. That is a fact. But China is it's got 300 gigawatts of solar, at least 300 gigawatts of wind power. They're set to sell 6 million EVs this year in 2022, which is more than the rest of the world combined. So like in terms of scale and investment in just clean energy companies and products, it's massive.
Yeah.
And so and the lady here, Hu Yaowen, she's in the second from the right. She is a young entrepreneur that a company named Global Energy. She runs wind and solar farms, a private company in Western China, in Xi'an, and also in Inner Mongolia. So she's out there, really, making it work when a lot of these companies are state backed. So she's competing against a lot of state backed companies.
Yeah.
And that's not, especially when it comes to price, when it comes to subsidies, when it comes to connections, it's challenging. And so she's out there and she's very successful, and really incredible to see entrepreneurs like this out there making a difference. And part of our work at Energy Nexus is how do we tell that story, right? Because you won't see her story anywhere, right? You won't see her story in any of the headlines. And strategic communication, narrative, and storytelling is something that, in addition to the startup accelerator work that we do, entrepreneurs are everything. And that's what we work for. Supporting the entrepreneurs and supporting the ecosystem that support the entrepreneurs is our mission and our focus. And, we have a podcast called China Clean Tech Podcast, which is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts that highlights climate innovators in China. We conduct the interviews in English, so we can broadcast this to most of the English-speaking audience. And we want to tell more of these stories because, unfortunately, they do get left out. But there's some pretty amazing things that are happening on the ground.
That is so cool. So cool to learn about all of this and share it with others so they can, in turn, learn about the work that you guys are doing. Maybe kind of two closing questions. One is just be great to get a quick take from your perspective about why you're optimistic about kind of clean tech in China over the next 5 to 10 years, and then kind of closing out with what are the other ways that we can all connect with New Energy Nexus China as part of kind of supporting your work, but also those who want to learn more about the market and connect into.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. That's a great question. I am very optimistic. I think, one, as I mentioned before, the policy it's set in stone, and let's target on the EV industry as a whole in China. I mean, they've been supported through government subsidies in the past couple of years, and now the market has taken over. People are now considering buying EVs either based off price or its cool features.
Wow.
It's no longer being incentivized by, hey, here's a massive subsidy. Like that effectively has shown how the Chinese government is able to stimulate industries. Yes, they'll pump lots of money into it in government subsidies in the beginning, but then after they'll sort of taper off after 3 or 4 years and sort of let the market run on its own. A lot of companies will die and they will fail, but that is the natural progression of this industry, and the ones that do rise to the occasion and win will be the dominant ones. And so they've done that with solar, right? They've done that with EVs. And so I'm confident that they're cyclical, right? And so what is the next industry that China's going to be focused on that pumps lots of government subsidies in and then sort of lets the market sort of take care of itself? And so I think that's a model that works, that's shown that it's worked. And so at least within the China context, I'm optimistic that because both of these models have worked, they'll continue to use this model in the next 5 to 10 years as a way to reach their carbon peaking goal by 2030 and then carbon neutrality by 2060. So, we're seeing something that has worked and will continue to work. And so it's just a matter of what sectors and industries they focus on next. So that's why I'm optimistic. And two, this talks a little bit more on cross-border, right? I mean, we're not going to sugarcoat it, right? We're living in definitely a very volatile times right now when it comes to energy crisis. I mean, it was, just talking about energy crisis, let's not talk about Russia, Ukraine for one, but let's just say the power outages in Western China because it was 40 degrees Celsius for 45.
Wow.
Everyone had their ACs on, so there was a blackout for essentially a couple days, right? And that can't happen. If that happens, like everyone's livelihoods are affected. And so we're seeing the climate so fluctuate so drastically for a lot of people. And there's survey from the China Youth Climate Action Network that said 84% of 18 to 24-year-olds in China think that climate change is a major issue. And so that to me signals that there's a younger generation of Chinese that are care more about the environment and are pursuing things that can help address environmental issues, right? And so I think that I'm optimistic that while we're showing a case of successful happenings within China, we have a younger population of people that believe climate change is an issue, and I do believe that the world the world issues right now will get better. I mean, I do feel like we've hit pretty rock bottom in terms of a lot of relations, and so. But the one thing that I feel like that everyone can agree on, at least between U.S. and China, is climate, right? And that continues to be, whether it's Biden's infrastructure plan and climate change being top of mind, and President Xi also in terms of carbon neutrality. So I do believe that that's an area that we need to continue to work together on and leverage our strengths. And so sorry. So Patrick, that was a long-winded answer to answer.
No, I love it. Thank you.
To your first question. And the second question is I appreciate New Energy Nexus. We have a newsletter. You can go on newenergynexus.com where we send out a newsletter just of stories from all our different chapters around the world of the latest and greatest climate solutions that are going through our cohorts and as well as our ecosystem, but also how we're connecting those dots to macro level trends, right? And at the end of the day, it's we're trying to address real market needs and challenges, right? That's the most efficient, effective way to address a challenge. And so really highlighting, connecting those dots on a local level and how those solutions address those issues is what we do. And so I would recommend people to go on energynexus.com. We actually also, I'll throw in a plug here. We just had our Climate of Change podcast season 2 just launched, featuring Danny Kennedy and Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
So they had our season 1 that was launched earlier this year. The season 2 just launched today. And so if you go on Energy Nexus Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, you'll be able to find the link. But do follow us on the sort of usual channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Slack. We have what's called a New Energy Network. So anybody who's operating in the space that want to get access to programs, to jobs, to connections, it's a very active channel with a lot of buzz that's happening in it. And then for the folks that do have WeChat, please check out New Energy Nexus on our WeChat official channel. We're also regularly posting stories and notes, mostly in Chinese. And so that's where you can find us.
Amazing. It's always so impressed with New Energy Nexus, Andrew, and it's just been really, really great to get some perspective on China and clean tech and the future. And I know definitely I'm holding the date in the diary to come to that summit next year, all things being equal with travel as well. I'm like you, I'm just completely optimistic that China is going to play such a massive role globally in helping with technology, not just domestically, but also globally. And agree, optimistic, cautiously optimistic, as they say, about kind of cross-border relations and all that kind of good stuff, because there's just, we've all got the planet in common, right? And so
exactly.
I think China is such an important stakeholder and leader globally, and that's kind of tough for some folks, but hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years, everyone will get on board and kind of leverage all the awesome tech that's coming out of the market. So thanks so much for joining us, Andrew, again, and encourage everyone to connect with New Energy Nexus through all those different channels, and we'll be keeping tabs on those developments, Andrew, and I hope to see you in the near future as well in person.
Absolutely, Patrick. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Holland IQ, and thank you for the audience for attending the summit. Look forward to speaking to you guys again.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye bye.
Cheers. All right.